Well, thank you for that welcome. It's always a special treat to speak at one of these gatherings at Elliott Bay Books. We are truly blessed to have this community treasure. It's our gathering place for community building and for deep discussion of meaningful issues in a way that can't be really covered in the world of normal soundbite journalism. We must all cherish and support this treasure, as we must cherish and support all of our local independent bookstores. We live at a time of desperate need for fresh ideas. The human context is changing with breathtaking speed. We face an imperative to redefine our relationships with one another and with Earth. Many of our most powerful institutions are collapsing because their time has come. If there is to be a human future, we must reinvent our cultural stories and our institutions, all in line with our new circumstances. Our independent bookstores are gathering places for book lovers like yourselves. I assume you're all book lovers here? And as you know, books allow for in-depth development of serious topics beyond what is possible in any other media. Book lovers are people who enjoy the thoughtful, in-depth examination of ideas. Does that fit you guys? And this brings me to C-SPAN, a very special media forum for diverse voices unmediated by conventional media filters. And it all comes together in C-SPAN's Book TV, which will be sharing our conversation today with a national audience. So you may have noticed we live in interesting times. Wall Street excesses have collapsed the U.S. economy and brought down the world economy with it. The primary culprits walked away with huge amounts of money, while innocent millions have lost their jobs and their homes. Inequality is tearing apart the social fabric, not only of our own country, but of societies around the world. We're fighting unnecessary and unwinnable wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Climate change is bringing massive weather disruptions that, along with the depletion of our soils and groundwater, threaten the world food system. And we depend on an aging physical and economic infrastructure designed to run on cheap oil, which is fast disappearing. Now, the good news is we finally have a president who understands that these are problems that need attention. We cannot, however, sit back and wait for President Obama to get us out of this mess all by himself. He has assumed the leadership of a nation weakened economically, morally, and militarily. We have a lot of rebuilding to do, and it's important that we get it right. We face a challenge that will require the total commitment of every person on the planet who has a moral conscience and a functioning mind, which I assume includes present company. For those of us who yearn for a world of peace, justice, and a vibrant natural environment, this is in fact a very exciting time to be alive. The old system is destroying itself to make way for the new. No one, however, is going to resolve the problems that threaten the survival of our species until we recognize the extent to which the problems are all interconnected and can be resolved only through a deep restructuring of our economic institutions to serve very different cultural values than those of Wall Street. Wall Street players, in alliance with the Federal Reserve, have used a combination of control over the money supply, predatory lending practices, and legal bribery of politicians to suppress wages, thwart efforts to protect the environment, dismantle social safety nets, capture the total benefits of productivity gains for themselves, shift the tax burden from financial speculators to working people, and reduce the poor to debt slavery. The bottom line message of Agenda for a New Economy is that Wall Street must be shut down and replaced with a new financial system designed to serve the needs of life rather than to make obscene amounts of money for Wall Street money managers. You'll notice this is a radical message. Yeah. I think your response mirrors what I'm seeing around the country, that there is a readiness for some new thinking about these issues. Now, there's a very special story behind this book I want to share with you. It was completed in record time with extraordinary support from my publisher, Barrett Kohler Publishers, my wife, Fran, and my colleagues at Yes Magazine, because we all recognized that the government's response to the financial collapse was limited to a futile effort to revive a totally corrupted financial system by pumping in vast quantities of taxpayer money. Furthermore, no one with a voice in the mainstream political discourse was calling attention to the connection between the corruption of Wall Street and the unfolding environmental and social collapse that in fact poses a far greater threat to our human future than does the financial collapse itself. The financial problem actually can be fixed with a relatively simple redesign of our financial system, as I spell out in Agenda for a New Economy. Environmental collapse, however, is terminal. And the proposed economic design will resolve both the financial and the environmental crisis and bring healing as well, social healing as well. Now, this makes economic redesign foundational, the foundational agenda. And we must get it on the table for serious conversation. This is why I wrote this book. So here's the story of how Agenda for a New Economy came to be. As the financial collapse was playing out, I wrote articles for Yes and Tikkun magazines that came out just after the 2008 election. In both articles, I took the position that the Wall Street bailout would fail because it didn't deal with the structural causes of the collapse. Steve Persanti, who's the founder and publisher of Barrett Kohler Publishers, read the Yes article, and just before midnight on November 24th, 2008, sent me an email proposing that I expand the article into a short book. So the next morning I got up, I saw Steve's message, reflected on the proposal with Fran, who's publisher of Yes Magazine, and I replied that afternoon to Steve that I was interested in his proposal. And I noted that by chance, I was scheduled to give a presentation at a national conference on January 23rd, 2009, just after the presidential inauguration, in the historic Wall Street Trinity Church that looks right straight down Wall Street. I'm sure you've all seen pictures of it. And I was thinking, what an incredible time and place to launch a book calling for this dismantling of Wall Street. Steve replied within an hour, suggesting that we have a telephone conversation that night. And during the call, Steve did a bit of calculation, and he said, well, if we're going to get that book delivered to the Trinity Church in time for a launch on January 23rd, you'll have to have a complete manuscript in the hands of the copy editor by December 15. That would give me 3 weeks to produce the manuscript. Now, my average for writing my previous books runs about 3 years per book. We agreed to move ahead. So I started writing that night and sent Steve a draft of the first chapter at 8:30 a.m. the next morning. And that very same night, less than 48 hours from the time of Steve's initial email, he sent me a message indicating that Barrett Kohler had a production team scheduled and in place, ready to go. So keep those chapters running. So I worked around the clock from that point on. And I'm sure most of you remember those nights in college when we pulled an all-nighter doing a term paper. Well, I had 16 of those right in a row. And the books arrived at Trinity Church, and we launched on January 23rd, exactly 2 months from the day of Steve's first email.